Welcome back, St. Louis sports fans, to your favorite St. Louis sports podcast, The Lunatics. I'm your host, Tyler Edwards, along with my friend and co-producer, John. Welcome, and what are you drinking for your beverage this evening?
Well, someone has been throwing a little fit that I crack open a cold beer during their intro. So today it's just water,
Okay,
combined
let's
with the fact
let's be real. You could crack your beer either before or after said intro and still be just fine.
I could, but that's less fun. Combine that with the fact that I'm a little dehydrated, and that I had the choice of beer calories or ice cream calories today, and I did
Mm,
choose the ice cream calories. Um, so plus, there's going to be plenty of opportunity for beer this week. So
yeah,
yeah,
you know, got the watch
got to
party
make
tomorrow
choices.
night.
Right.
Could not land a babysitter, so I'm going to be missing out on that one. Represent, my friend.
Oh, I will. I will. I'll make sure everyone knows that I am the cooler host, that I show up for my friends. And
You that's you do that, my man.
I will. I will. I'll pimp this so much.
My anniversary is also on Wednesday, so we'll see how that goes. On the flip side, though, if Lindsay like passes out at like 8:45, I'm just gonna send her a text and be like, "Hey, I left and went to the watch party."
You should do the same thing on Wednesday night for our soccer game, considering it's at 10:30 p.m.
I did that for the 11:20 game. Like I
Yeah.
fell asleep, I woke up and just texted her. I was like, "Hey, I went to the game." If you roll over in bed and I'm not there, this I'm
Right.
alive.
I am alive, and I promise I am playing soccer and not with a mistress. So
Yeah, I have
you
a
know
lot
where
of
to
people
find
who
me.
can. I have a lot of people who can vouch for me. I think they have cameras in
Yes,
that place too.
they do.
Since I
They
didn't
do.
say, on the flip side, I'm drinking Weller tonight. So what the
Oh, look at you.
surprise went with bourbon. I know it's a
I thought
shock.
I know. I thought you were gonna. Did you say? Oh, you finished the
Oh yeah,
Angels
no,
MV.
no, like yeah, I finished the Angels MD Rye before we actually started. I downed that so I
Oh,
could refill my glass for recording.
gotcha. I didn't know this was like a thing we pre-gamed, so
Yeah,
I'll have to
well,
step it up.
there wasn't enough for me to pour a glass big enough to last through the podcast, so I just, went with it. And I've got another bottle of Angels and Rye up on the shelf that I can open when I'm ready.
When you're ready.
I
Well,
I come prepared and I come to play ball. And do you know who else needs to come to play ball right now? The St. Louis Blues, because there is
sure.
rumors out that Brady Tkachuk is available.
I like your segue because my segue was going to be
A little
about
two-wheeled
being,
thing that you ride around.
yeah, right. Well, yeah, although those I think don't exist anymore. And now I actually forgot my segue, but it was something you said. Um, so anyway, doesn't matter. But supposedly Brady Kachuk's available. That shocks me because like every team in the league would take Brady Kachuk.
Oh yeah.
Like
No,
every team in the
it's
league.
but it's what is it going to cost to get him, and what is Ottawa looking to get out of it? I think it really comes down to, I mean, Brady Tkachuk signed that a longer, an extension a few years ago. He was part of that was him being named captain, but the kind of guy he's a Tkachuk, right?
Yeah.
He comes to play every day. I think him and his brother Matthew were the only two players in the NHL last year to lead their team, and I think it was points and penalty minutes.
Right.
So,
Right.
I mean, like, not only are they going to show up and be ready to go, but, they are going to, push forward and they're going to, not just put up points, but stand up for the team, bring it every night. You don't have to worry about what they are doing. So, um, and I think that's good. I don't want to spend a lot of time. I know we're going to do another episode way more in depth with Blues and Cardinals later this week. For you, if they come calling and if we can get a chance, it's going to be a hefty package. I'm thinking something in the neighborhood of, I don't know. I need to look at Ottawa's goaltending issue. And I initially thought they might want Benner, but I think if they're looking at rebuilding, Benner's going to be too old. I think they're going to probably want like a Hofer, probably a Jake Neighbors, first round pick, and then possibly a Dvorsky or a Snuggerud. I feel like it'd be like a four player, like a four play, three players and a first round pick.
Yeah.
and three
Yeah. I'm
good
not
players, three
three
NHL
good
ready
players.
players,
Right.
yeah, or
Right.
two NHL ready players, a prospect in a first round.
Right.
But
I of
I'm
that
I'm just
group.
throwing out things. But
Right.
who's off limits to you though?
Well, okay. So I think so. First off, Jr. had a great article yesterday, in the Athletic, talking about who the Blues could feasibly trade for anyone, right? Just who like would be available. And I think he made a really good point that there's three or four guys that probably are practically unavailable, but only one of them who is truly unavailable, which is Robert Thomas,
Hmm.
right? I think everyone else is like, if you came calling and you had a good deal, they'd probably take that trade, except for probably Robert Thomas. Would not mind, if Hofer, it's great having such a quality backup goalie. Um, but that also kind of makes him expendable because Benner plays a lot, right? Uh, so I'm not against putting him on it. I would hate to see Neighbors go. I really would. I think Neighbors has been a great part of the team, and I don't want to give up any of our prospects that we don't have to.
I for me, there are three players that are either unavailable or I don't think we would trade.
Okay, who you got?
Robert Thomas, he's the
Check.
only untradeable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, if you're getting Brady Tkachuk, your hope is that your first two lines are centered by Brady Tkachuk and Robert Thomas, which is terrifying for other teams to have to go up
Right.
against.
Right.
Um,
Exactly.
Next one is Colton Parayko, number one defenseman. We saw what we've gone through trying to replace Petro. One and two, I think he's old enough that I don't know that that's who Ottawa would want if they're going through a rebuild. And the third would be Benner for both the age reason as well as if he's still got some years left that he's going to be good. And if you're bringing in
Yeah.
Brady Tkachuk, you want to maximize that. But that's why I
That
think they would
window.
want
Yeah.
Hofer instead. Literally anybody else. I don't
Yeah.
anybody else. Take them all. Not
Yeah.
all, obviously, but you know what I mean. Like take what
Right.
you want.
You've
I
got your
wouldn't.
choice.
When it comes to like our prospects with Dvorsky and Snuggerud, I would only give one.
Yeah.
But if you're giving up Neighbors and a prospect, Neighbors has already shown that he's going to be a top two line guy in the NHL, like moving
Consistently.
forward.
Yeah.
And so like I feel like that's a win for them. I kind of wonder if any of our young defensemen might be somebody that they maybe find attractive and want one of them as well. But I could see sending 3 to 4 players and a first round pick, or 3 players and 2 first round picks situation for Brady Tkachuk.
Yeah.
Um, and for two reasons, I think you definitely do it. One, you're sending potential superstars, and in a perfect world, maybe we even send Kyrou to offset the salary because the NHL cap is just a nightmare.
Right. Right.
But to me, I mean, Kyrie was just benched in the third period. He's seeming more and more like, not that he can't play, because on the 4-0 win right before that,
Right.
he was the reason that we scored those goals, right? So like he's got the potential, but he's seeming to me more and more like a change of scenery candidate for maybe another team.
Yeah.
Um, and bringing Brady Tkachuk's salary, I think it'd be good to free up that space. So, but Brady Tkachuk is a generational talent, so I would take a generational talent over a potential great player every time.
Yeah.
And then couple that with the fact that it's the Tkachuk name
Right.
in
That
St.
name means
Louis.
some more in St. Louis than it would anywhere else. Right.
Correct. And you're going to sell jerseys, you're going to sell tickets. Like, it's going to be huge for the organization as a whole. So I think everyone but Robert Thomas is available. I think Colton Parayko and Benner are the other two that you hold on to. Although if for whatever reason they want Benner, as much as I love playoff Benner is a absolute monster. If they wanted Benner instead of Hofer, we've got Hofer, who's been a solid goalie,
Right.
and is
We could
young.
move on from either one of the goalies, and we still have the other goalie. I do think you're really kind of hitting the nail on the head there with your talk about selling tickets, selling jerseys with Brady Tkachuk. This team needs something for fans to get excited about, and getting Brady Tkachuk is definitely going to fit that criteria. Um, But again, this is all like speculation on our part, and there's no, it's not been reported that the Blues are in on Brady Tkachuk or making offers or anything like that. We should be clear about that. This is just coming from the other side that supposedly he's available, and so every podcast that covers every NHL team in the whole world is saying this is what we could do to get Brady Tkachuk. So this is not even like an original concept on our end.
It's not. It's really not. But
yeah,
we are full of original content, though.
Well, sometimes we did just get recognized by Facebook as being a rising creator for producing original content. So very proud of ourselves for that.
Hey man, you should talk to our real creator about that. It seems like they're spiking.
It's probably the reels. It's also probably the fact that we actually started like making crap again for all of all the teams, as opposed to just throwing these episodes out into the internet.
That's fair.
But and as part of that, it's been a little bit of Cards content that we've been putting out there too, because we've got Cardinals spring training, which spring training results don't matter, right? You could get lit up in a game, and it's because you're throwing the same pitch like just back to back to back, because you're trying to locate it, you're trying to get that grip right. Same thing with hitters. They're trying to work on recognizing a certain pitch. They're trying to recognize a certain part of the zone,
working on a certain mechanic of their swing.
Right. Yeah. It's not a competitive match. They're not playing to win. It's practice against other people that you don't see every day.
But you play to win the game.
Sure. But it's, whose line is it anyway, where the points don't really matter and everybody wins. So I don't care.
No, I'm just giving you. I'm just giving you shit.
Yeah. No,
but with the Cards, spring training results don't matter. And I think that's one of the things people read so much into. The flip side of that, though, is there's a lot that can go into spring training if there's a guy who's on the fence about what his role will be. I think that's going to be huge.
Right.
There was some news out of spring training camp that we'll touch on here briefly, since I don't. So it's not old news. We'll probably talk a lot more in depth about it, and what that looks like, and maybe we'll have more information when we record again here in a few nights. But Brandon Crawford signing on. I personally was excited about this signing. I was not excited for the reason that we had to sign him. So obviously Tommy Edman is unknown when he's going to be ready. So we needed a backup shortstop. Signing Brandon Crawford, age 37, is exciting. It's great. But he brings, to me, if he's being brought in to just be the day off guy, potentially pinch hit here and there, I'm all for it, because he's somebody he's won multiple World Series. He knows how to play the game. And I think it could be huge for Mason Wynn, as far as having him as a mentor and kind of somebody to help him learn how to be a big leaguer day in and day out. And for me, that's what's important about that. And he's not blocking like this signing. People are gonna be like, oh, he's so old. His signing isn't blocking any young guys from coming up through the system, right?
Right.
He's coming up. He's taking that spot. He's the backup shortstop. As long as that's what his role is going to be, I think it's going to be fine. So that's my take on it.
Like, we're not signing him because, this is peak Brandon Crawford at the plate. We're signing him because it gives us defensive depth at a position that you really, really need to be strong at defensively to be competitive. And because of his locker room presence, because again, he's another experienced guy. He's been in the World Series. He's won what, two with the Giants.
He won two. He was not on the first one. He was on for the second and third of that. That every other year run they went on.
Yeah, they were. God, there were some great playoff matches between us and the Giants there for like 5 years in a row, which was just. God, I miss the early 2010s, and I'm sure all of our friends in San Francisco do as well. I mean, 2 years ago, he had easily the best career of his season, but he just plummeted after that offensively. And that's, like I said, we're not signing him for that. We're signing him to be defensive cover, and that's okay.
Defensive cover, he's still got some power. So if he gets a hold of one, he can still hit some long. He still hit some ding dong Johnsons. Um,
Ding dong Johnsons. Yeah.
and
Well,
and
and the
you
other
sent me
thing,
this earlier, and this is something that I think is funny, right? He's 37.
yeah.
You sent me this. The uh, only Cards
Oh,
fans
yeah.
posted
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
but it was
On
that
Twitter. Yeah.
Cardinals traded for Nolan Arenado in 2021, and he was the ninth oldest player on the opening day roster. 3 years later, he's currently the 10th oldest player on the roster.
Yeah. I
3 years
saw that and
later.
I was like, oh God, that's rough.
Oh my God.
Oh
Speaking of
no.
rough,
But hold up.
last. Oh, okay, go
I've
ahead.
got one more thing about Crawford. Um, this does mean that someone who we were probably expecting to break camp with the big league team, both on the 40-man and the 26, is going to have to be moved off of those lists. So there will be roster changes coming soon, possibly even before our listeners have listened to this. That will probably be announced because I think we're recording Monday night. It's supposed to be announced Tuesday morning, so the corresponding move will probably come out tomorrow morning as well. But anyway, that was all I had to say. Please return.
Corresponding moves. There was a post today, speaking of moving around, that St. Louis City was out in Houston warming up, and I actually saw some pictures of Parker out on the pitch, which was encouraging. But let's talk
Yeah.
about City because that's really the focus of this episode, and it took us a minute to get there. So, you and I were both at the Houston game last week.
We was there.
It was exciting. We won. It was a little nerve-wracking there towards the end, but excited to see us pull out the W.
That okay. So as far as that Houston game goes, I do think we were the better team that night. I thought we had the better chances. I thought we were just barely missing on them. I mean, Sam rocked the frame twice, and the one time it shook for like 30 seconds. Like
It
that thing
damn
was
near
just
bounced back
going.
out to midfield after it hit the crossbar.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Klaus had a couple good chances that game. AZ had one, I think, that was, pretty good.
Totland
Um,
looks good still,
Totland looked
taking
good.
shots from the
Yeah,
top of the
that
box.
shot.
That
Oh
ridiculous
my God.
diving save that their goalie made was
Yeah, that was
nuts in that Houston game.
Berkey level save, right
Yeah.
there. And
Yeah.
I think we deserve the win. It is a very depleted Houston side, though. I feel like we probably are, for how beat up that Houston side was, we should have beat them by several. I feel like that's just me.
We played
Um,
like we should have beat. I think my issue is we played like we should have beat them by several. We had
yeah,
so many
there you go.
opportunities, and for a team that last year was really, really keen on capitalizing on the chances we got, we did
Yep.
not capitalize on the chances we got.
Yeah. Absolutely. And and it was looking like we were going to come out with a draw that we could have easily turned into a loss because Houston had some strong moments on their own. And then Kojima, comes on, signs his contract in the morning, comes on to the roster that night, comes into the game with 4 minutes left, scores the game winner at the death of the game, and then rocks a slide that Joao Klaus has never pulled off. Like this is Kojima's team now. Like this is the world we live in.
Yeah, no. I would also like to point out, you saw there was two players that kind of led into the ball getting into Kojima. So Leuven was down in the corner on that throw in,
Yep.
runs
Yep.
out of that lane, pulls two defenders with him to where Celio
Yep.
runs into that space. They throw the ball to Celio, who then is able to get the ball into the middle. Just the awareness of Leuven and Celio to know, like
Yep.
Leuven to be like, these guys are all over me because they're looking to me to be the creator right now,
Right.
and to pull
Absolutely.
those defenders out, and then for Celio to take that space and take it aggressively, which he's not afraid to do. Um, and then put the ball in the middle. There was a weird deflection. But again, it
Well,
goes
okay,
back
but
to,
as
was
far
his
as that,
goal intentional on Kansas City? Maybe, maybe not. But if you put the ball in dangerous place spots, things happen.
well, and it's not just that, right? It's the fact that he sends the ball in to Kojima, and I can't remember exactly when it takes the deflection, but Kojima, keeps going for the ball when Houston's back line does not. Okay. So it's not just that we put the ball into the dangerous spot, it's that we kept hustling and grinding to go after it. And then he has an excellent finish to put it just out of reach for Clark to block it as the goalie. So, like, there's a lot that had to go right there. But again, you make your own luck by doing that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's something we did really well last year is we made our own luck. Um, we'll jump into this and then we'll kind of get into more of a player by player analysis, I think. But then we had Real Salt Lake come to town Saturday night. You were at that game, correct?
I was at that game.
I was not, sadly, but we'll see if I can line up the babysitter situation. I'm going to try. I'll be at the game this Saturday. So,
Oh, well, let me know because I am going to the game this Saturday, but I haven't bought tickets yet. So we might be able to coordinate that.
so,
Let me
but
know.
yeah, I'll keep you in the loop. We'll talk after we finish
We'll
recording,
talk.
figure
Your
some of that
people
out.
will talk my people. Yeah,
I'll have my
we
people
got
call
it.
your people.
Perfect.
More importantly, Real Salt Lake came to town, and it was an ugly game, man. I mean, across the board, it was an ugly game for both teams.
Yeah, and I don't. In some ways, I felt like Houston was a really ugly game for both teams because I felt like both sides were taking really bad touches. But I felt like we were recovering the second ball. We were making decent passes in Houston, and then against RSL, it was none of that. We were still getting bad touches. We were not completing the short passes that we needed to get out of trouble. We were definitely not getting the second balls. RSL came up with almost all of them, and I also felt like a lot of specifically the midfield players were not tracking back very well. They were not. They were like just like completely caught off guard by some of the transitions. I thought every member of our defense, so the entire back line, and I'll throw in Jaby LeBlanc into this too. I felt like each one of them had individual moments of brilliance at some point in that game, but they were all necessitated by a full breakdown in the midfield that led to a quick counter. Um, and so part of that is going to be scheme based, right? We're going to give up counters because we're going to push forward and we're going to create these kind of weird formational situations. But we also kind of made them happen more often than they should have through poor play.
Yeah, I agree. The RSL game was a winnable game, but we just played sloppy. And
Yeah.
I guess my initial takeaway from both of these games is, I mean, St. Louis City last year came out and they came out with a very clear identity. This is what we're going to do. We had
Yeah.
a couple of lucky breaks. I mean, let's call a spade, right? Some
Yeah.
back passes and things that led to some goals that came out as wins.
Own
Um,
goals against Charlotte too, right?
yeah,
Like
and so
there was some moment.
yeah, so there's some stuff that bounced our way, but I mean, Klaus had a back pass against Houston and couldn't put the ball in the back of the net. We
Yeah,
had
I saw that and I was like, oh, this is not last year anymore.
yeah, and so it's those little things, but we had a very clear identity. You could tell the entire team was unified in what we wanted to do, and I just feel like there's a little bit of that. To me, last year we were the team that came out and had the team chemistry, and everyone was ready to go and knew their role. And this year, I feel like there's still a little bit of that figuring out how we're going to play together. I think part of that is the Big Sam Klaus combination, like in the Houston game, right?
Yeah.
Where you had Giochini and Klaus, and Giochini is incredibly well at playing with other strikers and playing
Yep.
off of them. Big Sam is very much and this is not to pick on him because he's a great
No,
striker, but he's a very
right.
different striker. He's
Right.
very much the
He's a lone striker type of guy for sure.
Mhm.
For sure. And that's fine. We just have to put him in that position to succeed.
Yes.
And I think, when the way Klaus plays versus the way Sam plays. So Klaus likes to be in hold up play and he likes to get his short pass to someone that's running behind. And then he'll, make an overlapping run behind them to kind of create these very advantageous situations in the box. And he's also very much when the ball is kind of pinging around the box, he's very much looking for where is going to be the best shot, or where's the ball looking like it will be in two passes or two, movements, and trying to put himself there to capitalize that way. Sam is very much okay, you've got space on either wing in front of me. You just throw it up there or get it to me put me one-on-one on someone, and I'm going to beat them with speed and maybe with a little bit of finesse that they're not going to expect. And they just don't match well together on the field. The other part of that, and I'm very interested in your thoughts, and I did not warn you at all that I was going to throw this out here, but it's a thought I've had for a while.
I'm going to laugh really hard if it's something I was already thinking of, but we'll see.
We'll see. I don't necessarily think the team is always at its best when AZ plays, because I think he does very good off the ball, and I think he does very good when he can get in transition. But sometimes when he's on the ball, he's very, very chaotic and frenetic. And he needs to, I think, slow it down just a little bit to be able to link up better with the other members of the midfield or with Klaus. I don't know if we necessarily have like someone else who I think would be better than AZ. I just think that these are areas of
We
his
do.
game that we do. And were you going to say Celio?
No.
Oh, interesting.
Leuven.
Were you going to say Indy? Oh, Leuven. Yeah. Yeah. The obvious answer.
I mean,
yeah,
but I mean, like we have somebody who's better in that role. And I think this kind of leads into something that I've thought a lot about, right? When you put out you pick your best 11. I don't know that AZ's in my best 11 unless he's on the outside midfield.
So I have that similar thought, because I think our best 11 does include a midfield triangle of Leuven, Dirk, and Blom. Right. My other thought,
I see a double pivot in the back with Dirk and Blom. I see Leuven playing in the 10 role. I see it
absolutely.
as a 4-2-3-1 right now.
Yeah.
With either Klaus or Big Sam up top. I think Big Sam right now looks better as a lone striker than Klaus. And then you've got options on your outside midfield based on who's hot at the time. If Alm comes back and is playing two form, he's going to be a great option on the outside. Honestly, Thorson has looked really good to me as a whole, and could be
with Thor
and could.
Friday,
so if you run,
Saturday.
Imagine running a 4-2-3-1 where your two in your midfield is your two in the back is Durkin and Blom, and then your 10, your center up top in the midfield is Leuven with Thorson and Alm on either side.
Right. I agree with that. That's a top 11 that I could get behind. I do think that if we're listing a top 11 as in our top 11 players, Sam Adeniran is probably listed there, but our top 11 on the field does not include Klaus and Adeniran. And that's okay, because that gives us flexibility for when one of them can't play because of fitness or whatever.
Or a change of pace. Hey,
or a change of pace.
This because
Saturday.
they play so differently.
Right.
If one isn't working, try the other.
Right. And that's good. Teams need that. You need guys who can do different things, and then you also need guys who can fit with both to make it work no matter who's out there. I thought Thor looked very good on Saturday. I thought it was his best game in City Red yet. I think he had, I think a lot of people were kind of still a little to him, but I thought he had really good link-up play. I thought he was getting into dangerous spots on the wings. He had several through balls across the top of the box that should have been buried. And I think if either of them had been buried, we'd have been like, hey, Thor had a great game. Like he had that assist.
And I'm gonna take this back, but you and I talked about this. We've talked about this a lot. I mean, since the season ended, about how much we were excited to see Thorson having a preseason and having time to learn the system and being more comfortable with these guys, that we thought he was going to be one of the guys. And I think he's showing that.
Yeah. I heard at the end of the game on Tuesday, I did not see this happen, but it's something I heard that I guess he was having an argument with the coaches on the sideline. And the thought is that it was because he wasn't going in. And like, you know, people in St. Louis sometimes get really mad about that because, you know, doing it the Cardinal way, no matter which team you're playing for, and like the appearance and being a, you know, a true professional. I don't necessarily mind this from a guy that we consider a winger or a striker, that he's pissed he's not going in, right? You think if Klaus was not going into a game that he'd be sitting over there calmly like, oh yeah, I guess I'm not playing today? No, he'd be freaking livid.
I think too, for somebody like Thorson, who's been such a low key, quiet guy, it's nice to see a little fire out of him, right?
Oh yeah,
If
yeah,
it's different if it's every time with the player, right? Like if it's
right,
every game,
right,
the player's in your face. But when you've got a low key, easygoing guy who all of a sudden you see that fire, it's just nice to see the fire and the passion.
yeah, right. I want guys who want to be out on the field and think that they can help the team win. Like that's what I want. Now, if he, you know, goes out there and completely sucks, well, that's a different story. And I think on Saturday, I think a lot of guys sucked, and I think their post game comments reflected that as well. Leuven said it, Carnell said it. You know, it was a bad game. They were not getting great touches, not getting those second balls. They were lacking intensity. Um, but another thing that they said is that good teams find a way to salvage points when they're not having a good day, and that's what we did. And so that's okay. And also, like, we only have to be ninth to make the playoffs. Our league goal this year is to make the playoffs. We need to be focusing on CONCACAF Champions Cup right now and just resting and recovering. And any points we get in the league while that's going on are good points. And then after that, we can fight for seeding in the playoffs.
I don't disagree. I think you know, league is important. You know, it's always going to be important. It's always going to be just because of the United States sports culture and the playoffs and all those things that come with it, as far as growing the brand with locally, but to grow the
Right.
brand internationally, which is incredibly important as well. That's where CONCACAF Champions Cup is most
Right.
important. And you know, we won the first game. We've got a chance here. I think the other thing that, you know, when I say, well, this is my top 11, I talk about the Durkin Blom double pivot, you know, you're less likely to see it right now because of the fixture congestion. They're
Yeah,
trying to
absolutely.
mix and match. And so I think that's forcing Leuven back, and that's not where he's at his best.
Right. Who would you say has been at their best through the first two games? I think there's two very clear guys who I think have been just absolutely, like, very clearly the best two players on the team through 180 minutes.
I don't know if it's going to be the same two that you're going to say,
We'll see.
but the first two that come to my mind are Totland and Durkin.
Durkin was in that step right beneath, but I don't really have
My
anything to
issue
fault
is
him with. So he would
because
have been the third guy I listed if I
so
listed
so
three.
the next one that I would say has looked at the top of his game to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, well, I mean, it's going to be Big Sam. Big Sam looks to be
Right.
fit and ready to go. But I think it's hard to fault Durkin right now because Durkin didn't
Right.
play as much in that second game.
And I thought he looked fine when he came on.
But
He,
it's the
you
same for
know,
Big Sam, though. Big Sam didn't
yeah,
play as much, but he made such an impact.
exactly. Exactly. So just so you know, the mute didn't work. So,
Oh, fantastic.
right.
Maybe you should cut that before you post this one.
No, I don't cut anything. I don't, there's no bleeping, no cutting except for
It's fine,
one moment. But, um,
except for that
yeah,
one time.
except for that one time at band camp. My mom's going to love that. American Pie is like her favorite movie of all
Oh,
time.
fair warning. I've got another conference in April, so
Perfect. But those are the three that I think have very clearly, I think, been the best. I think Blom is maybe a step behind them.
mhm.
Could not really fault Blom for very much on Saturday's game. I know there's a page I follow that focuses very much on tactics and stats and like how the guys play and how the numbers like describe how they play. He's really hard on Blom, particularly because of Blom's on the ball skills and some of Blom's passing metrics. I think his passing is okay most of the time.
He had a couple errant passes, and it's so
Right,
early on that those make it look worse than it is for the season.
right, right, right. But like I said, I think it was mostly okay. Like he let me put it another way. If he was better on the ball and better at passing, he would not be playing in MLS. He would be playing in the Bundesliga because he's that physically good. like, like
Yeah, I think another player that we're not mentioning but has looked really good is Marcanic.
mostly, I
He's
put Marcanic.
he's had a couple of moments, right? But he makes you he the end of last season, I started to have a few doubts about him,
Yeah,
and how he was going to play. And he, to me, seems like a true number two left back now. I'm not saying he needs to be the guy. I think that's why we signed Dewar.
sure.
But to me, he makes me more, the play I've seen out of him makes me more comfortable
Oh, sure.
having
Yeah,
him to like continue. And again, for me, it's low expectations, right? And not,
yeah,
I say that sounds bad, but you're not paying the guy much, so you don't like, if he's playing well and he's playing at a high level, that's a bonus. But we're not
right,
paying him that much. It's the same thing with Celio, right? I mean, I think Celio makes like 60K a year.
right, right.
So
And
like,
Marcanic makes the same. They're
yeah,
on the same salary. It's the league minimum.
yeah.
So
And so the two of them, I mean, like when you have two guys who are legitimate contributors to your club on league minimum salaries, like anything you're getting is a bonus.
right.
But then when you see these two guys contributing on a regular basis, it's encouraging. Um,
Yeah, I feel like Marcanic. He had. I felt like he was better in the second game than he was in the first game, and I feel like overall it was a bit of a roller coaster. He had some very bad moments, but he also had some just phenomenal moments. And all of these guys did. Durkin did, Blom did, every center back that's lined up for us so far, where they just come out of
all
nowhere,
12 of
coming,
them.
yeah, all 12 of them, sprinting back on these counters to come up with a huge play right at the at a spot where it looks like they're gonna score. And like I said, part of that is going to be because of our scheme and our system. Like we're going to be more susceptible to that, and we have more attacking minded fullbacks now, right? So we're going to see those situations come up more often. In Houston, we saw Durkin and Klaus both come in with these slide tackles in the left on like our left defensive half. And so that was an issue, that they're the ones making these. Durkin, not so much as Klaus. Klaus, I was like, why is Klaus the guy sprinting 80
But
yards to
but
make
on
the
the flip
slide?
side, if he's the guy who's furthest back when the transition takes place,
Well, yeah, right.
I'm impressed that we have a striker
Our
who
striker will
cares
do
enough to
it.
do it.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, like to
absolutely.
me,
I'm not
it was
that
a
mad about it.
huge, like it's frustrating that he was put in that position,
Right,
but it's
right. That's what I mean.
super amazing to have a striker who gives a shit enough to make that run, to
Right.
make that tackle, to make that stop.
Yeah.
I think to me, Totland has been my highlight player that I have been
Oh, for
most. I was
sure.
super excited to see him play anyway, especially after some of the preseason games we saw. But I mean, he hasn't. He's going to score some goals from the top of the box
Yeah.
on some of these
Yeah.
shots. I mean, he had one. I mean, phenomenal shot both games. He had a couple other close ones
Yeah.
in each game, but you had the ridiculous save that Houston's goalie had to make
Yep.
on that. I mean, it was going upper 90 far post, and then you
Oh,
had
yeah.
the other. I mean, just sinking knuckler that the
Hmm.
RSL keeper had to save again. Having that from your right back position is something that we have literally not had.
Well, and
And
it's
then the
such a rare
flexibility
thing.
he has. So think about when Nerwinski came on in RSL, and
Hmm.
Totland is completely comfortable moving up to the right midfield spot.
Right. Right. It kind of looked like he was maybe even more of like a wing back in that formation. But that's semantics, really, I think, at that point. But his one shot against RSL, the other thing I want to say is, that was a night where Leuven's touch was really bad. I think he only had two really good passes, one being the goal that Adeniran scored, and the other one being the corner where he literally put the ball at Tottenham's feet, like at the top of the box. Like I don't think Tottenham moved. Like it just like came straight to him, and he just settled it and then ripped a shot.
Was it not? But was it not Klaus's corner or Leuven's corner that Klaus put his head on right into the post or right into the guy on the post.
Right. Yeah. So okay.
So I
So then
mean,
there was
so
also that one, and there was also I think he delivered that one that AZ got on. So four good passes, but a lot of his passes looked really rough Saturday.
I think that's a good transition to what I'm concerned about, right? There was two
Okay.
players that I felt like their fitness is not there, and I know why.
Yeah.
But you had Klaus and you had Nielsen, and I think their lack of a preseason really shone through in that RSL game.
Nielsen or Leuven?
Both.
Because here's my thing about Nielsen. Okay.
So
First
I'm
off,
not,
Nielsen probably.
and Nielsen played fine, and Nielsen as a whole was great. But I think to him, I think if you again watching the you were at the game, I was watching on
Yeah.
TV. Watching on TV, um, he looked like he was a split second slow on his decision making when he was making the breaks. And then when you're going against a very speedy RSL line, like top
Right.
line, that's not going to help you any.
So
And I
my
thought he recovered well and he played it really well, but I felt like that split second decision making is just a product of the lack of preseason where he's still getting back into game mindset.
Sure. And I do think that he will be making faster decisions, but I actually viewed it the other way. Like you said, RSL's attacking players are very fast. They've got consistently among the fastest players at every position for the whole league. Nielsen is not a top end speed center back, especially after the knee injury. I don't know what he was before, but he's definitely not going to be winning foot races. I think he overcomes that because he's understanding what's happening and he puts himself in good positions. And I actually think that that's why he was able to counteract them so well is because of his positioning and because he was making these decisions quickly enough to where they weren't able to like beat him with their speed the way Sam beat the RSL backline with his speed. Right now,
Yeah,
that being said, the RSL left back was in the right spot. You just can't. When a guy who's 6 inches taller than you is also that much faster than you and also has that kind of touch, there's not a lot you can really do. Um, but yeah, so I do think that Nielsen was not going to go 90. I do think that um, kind of like Blom, when Indy broke his nose last year against Austin, Blom
hmm
was not supposed to play 80 something minutes that night because he wasn't fit enough to, but he had to and he did. And I think that that's kind of where Nielsen was against
yeah.
RSL.
Initially, I thought Nielsen would be a 60th, maybe 75th minute sub,
Right.
and I was impressed with him for going the distance. Well, I'm thinking of subs. Something I want to touch on is the Houston game, and I don't know if
Okay.
you picked up on this, but I saw I was sitting there talking to my uncle who was at the game with, and I was like, we need to make a change. Our guys look gassed. Right before Houston scored the goal, I felt like we were 5 to maybe 8 minutes. Again, it goes back to I think
Yes.
Carnell is still in my mind at times like he's willing to use all of his subs, but I feel like if you're going to use them earlier when they're going to impact more of the game, and he
Right.
won't, and he doesn't. He's still not there, and that could change again. It's early in the season. You're also trying to manage fitness. You've got multiple competitions, things going on. So like, I don't want to overly criticize Carnell because I love Carnell. I think he's done a wonderful job with our team. But I do get concerned. And again, the one place of criticism I had last year and again this year is there's times that I wonder, if he see like I just want to know what he's seeing that I'm not,
Right.
why he's not making that change because I felt like it was obvious to me that our guys look gassed and we need to make a change. It's the
Hmm.
first game of the season. You would expect this to be the case, but
Right.
he didn't make that change, and it led to I feel like that's what led to the Houston goal.
Yeah. I agree with you. I was having a similar thought because I think we tend to be at our best when we make good 60-minute subs because that gives them a few minutes to grow into the game and then they can really start ramping up on some tired legs before the other team starts to make changes. I also think you and I might be the only ones who will say this or at least feel this or feel this way or at least will say it. Um, because everyone else gets just caught on the fact that cumulatively he subs more than all the other coaches in MLS. And I'm like, okay, sure. We brought on 3 subs against Houston, right? And then we had 1 sub change left, and instead of bringing 2 guys on, we only brought on 1, and that 1 was Kojima. Like, no one expects that a guy coming on in the 86th minute is really going to impact the game. You're just there to like run around, clean stuff up, go in for tackles, really like be more energy, essentially for
Yeah.
5 minutes to close it out.
Well, and I think the reason that you and I hit on this so much, and I assume it's the reason you also hit on it, but it's the reason that it's so apparent to me is because of the style we play. When
Yeah,
you're playing a
exactly.
high press, when you're going after it and you're constantly running at people, it wears them out, but guess what? It wears your team down too. So you sub
Yeah,
out the guys that look like they're losing it or look like they're getting gassed, and then you take advantage of that and then you let them run. And I think that's why, like Celio, who's so good off the dribble, he doesn't have top end speed though.
no,
But you sub him in the 60th minute and he's running on somebody who's already been run at for 60
right.
minutes.
Yeah,
He's going to win that battle every time.
right. Well, and Stroud's the same way, right? And I do think Stroud also set up some of the other guys by tiring out the other team. But anytime Stroud came off the bench in the 65th minute, he was an absolute terror for the last half hour of the game. Like he just was not holding back at all.
Think Ostrak's another one. Ostrak
Ostrak,
last
yeah,
year as a starter looked awful last year. But when he came on as a sub, at times completely changed the feel of the game because
yeah,
he was running on tired legs,
yeah,
running against tired legs. And I think I don't feel like, that 60th to 70th minute, I think is where we need to make majority of our changes. I'm not, if we're going to make 5 subs, I think 2 to 3 of them have to be in that 60 to 70th minute.
yeah. I'm so glad you brought up Ostrak because I forgot to mention him when we talked about player performances. Because I noticed something against Houston with regards to Ostrak and AZ, and I noticed this again with AZ against RSL. And this is something that I had meant to say earlier. So there were a lot of times against Houston. So I felt like neither AZ nor Ostrak really impacted that game very much on the whole. And a large part of that is it felt like they were always in the same space. And I'm curious if you saw that and felt the same way. And they were always in the space
I,
that I would have expected Ostrak to be in based on the formation.
yeah, again, this comes back to, and again, I think AZ is a great player. I think AZ is a great player in the right situations.
Right.
He would, thinking back, last year, I know people were, super high on AZ, and I think he made a huge, great difference, and he's definitely an MLS caliber player. And again, if he can clean some of this up, he's going to go and he's going to be worth way more than what's, City's ever going to be able to pay him. But he doesn't, he gets the ball at his feet and he doesn't look up.
Right.
Watch him next time if you haven't before, and to our
Yeah.
listeners. If you're like, oh no, AZ's great, watch him the moment the ball hits his feet. He is unaware of like 90% of what's happening around him.
Right. And that's why he only can complete those really short passes to people who are right next to him because he has to catch them out of like, his periphery. And you have to be really close to get for him to catch your attention at that point. But then against RSL, I kind of felt the same thing was happening. And him and Leuven and Thor a lot of times at the center line, like anytime they were close to the center line, it seemed like all 3 of them were in the same spot and one of them would win the ball back. But then like they couldn't pass it to anyone else because they were all just sitting there blocking the passing lanes and not being available to get the ball.
I think this just it comes back to where AZ and is a lot is very much the guy. He sees ball, he goes gets ball.
Yeah.
In my mind, right? Like he's
Yeah.
gonna like if the ball's coming in, even if it's blatantly played for another player on our team who's making a run, if
Yeah.
AZ can get there with his speed, he's gonna go get the ball. And
Right.
I think that encroaches on space with a lot of the guys and makes it really hard for them to play off of. I think that's
Right.
also why, in my mind, right, Leuven needs to be in that spot.
Yeah. And I think AZ and Indy are given a lot of didn't work again, just so you
I
know.
know.
Your mic might
I
be
don't.
busted.
Hmm. I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't know. I'll
I
figure it out.
think so. You and I have talked a lot about AZ and Indy and how much flexibility and freedom they have to invert and move around the field. I do kind of wonder if sometimes they might benefit from a little bit more structure, especially AZ, but also Indy could. And the fact that, like, if we can catch Indy on the break, kind of similar to how we catch Sam, but instead of it being, long pass deep into the wing, um, I'm thinking more like pass on the ground while AZ is running into space, in the midfield in the space. He could be
Yeah.
really dangerous there. And I think we need to try to maximize these opportunities to put him in those situations to do that. Um, but I don't know. It's just a thing I've been thinking lately, and I was curious your thoughts on it, or if I was completely crazy.
No, I agree. I think there's definitely a big gap, and I think there's a need for structure with our middle people, with our midfield as a whole, and I think they struggle to to play off of each other at times because of that encroachment of space where they just don't have the space to do what they need to do. So the midfield, again, if they can play off each other better, obviously we're going to have better feel for it. But I still think Leuven at the 10 is a vocal and leader as well. And I think he's going to help drive people and maybe develop some of that structure on his own. I think it'll be interesting to see how we rotate and how we play over these next couple games. We've got Houston tomorrow night, and then we've got NYC FC on Saturday. Do you think that they truly go all out? And what do we do with our center backs?
Um, First off, yes, I think they go all out. Now, what does all out look like for this game? This means that a few people that maybe are, you know, not 100% fit play. But I think they're, the most fit people on the day necessarily, right? Um, I, so for an example for that, right? Sam played full 90 on Tuesday. He played 30 or 40 something ish against RSL. I think Sam's the clear starter at striker, right? So I think that's because he's the most informed. I think he's also the most fit. I think coach was probably saving him for Tuesday because he's from Houston and going to give him that chance to, play in front of his family, especially because he missed it last year because of, his own fault, getting that second yellow against Galaxy, but he still missed it last year. Um, I think that for all those reasons there. Um, I also think I'm trying to think through the rest of the lineup. I think Indy probably starts. I think Durkin probably starts. I think we would both probably have them in our top 11s right now.
Hmm.
I don't know if Leuven starts. It depends on how well he recovers. He went longer than he was supposed to against RSL supposedly, partly because of necessity. So I have no idea if he's going to start. I don't think AZ starts, but then again, AZ is like 22, 23 and is obviously one of the fittest guys on the team. So maybe he'll recover enough. I think Dewar starts, although Dewar wasn't on the roster on Saturday, which was surprising to me. So I don't know what to make of that, but I think you almost have to because you have to, Watts is going to probably have to play somewhere this game. And it's probably not left back. So, I could see Watts being in central midfield. I could see Watts being at right back. It depends on what they do with Nerwinski and the center backs, which was your other question. I have no idea what they do. I have no effing idea. You could tell me any combination of our center backs as who starts, and I would say, okay. And that's including Nerwinski in there. And I would say, yeah, that makes sense. I can see why they did that.
Yeah, I don't think Yarrow plays. I mean, Yarrow more or less played the last two entire games,
Right.
and
I
literally
and
his face took an absolute beating.
I can't believe they put him back in. that second time, Tyler, like it happened right in front of us with where our
Oh
seats
no,
were,
I mean
and
watching
like,
the replays on the TV, like Lindsay
yeah,
and I were talking, we're like, there's no way they're going to put him back in.
right,
And
like I am convinced he was unconscious as he fell to the ground. Like I am. There's no doubt in my mind he was unconscious. Like he just dropped.
where were your seats at?
They were right. They were in 211, and they were the last two like in the row. So like my seat was like literally on the goal line.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, it was really neat. So like that Nerwinski clearance, like
Hmm.
I know on TV it looked like it was going to go wide, and that's probably a better angle
Well,
than I had. But like from where I
they
was
said
sitting,
it
it
they
looked like
said
it was
it
going in.
they said it looked like it was going to go wide, but I mean they kept playing the replay and the announcer kept saying that, but I was like, to me it looked like it was potential, like it was headed at the post, which
Right.
is who the hell
To go
knows
either
which way
way.
it's going to bounce, right?
Right.
Which is a
Right.
whole other thing.
Yeah.
um, I
But the
think,
clearance looked awesome from where I was sitting.
oh, I mean on the TV, like Lindsay and I were like, dude, he just saved a goal. Granted,
Hmm.
we were not watching real time, and I forgot to turn off some of my notifications because I have so many different notifications. I
Oh
already knew
yeah.
the outcome of the game, but was
Uh,
still like watching it with Lindsay because I wanted to see how the game played out because I
right.
love soccer and it's an excuse to watch a game with my wife. So,
Sure.
now that I've converted her to a soccer fan, if those of you who don't know, my wife used to not watch any professional sports. 11 years on Wednesday for us, which is exciting, being married. But we didn't, she used to not watch any sports. It turned her into a Cardinals fan. She, started watching those games off and on with me. Um, could not get her into soccer until the last World Cup. And for those of you out there, you all can hate me for all you want because I'm sure I'm going to get hate on for this if anybody actually listens. Um, but I've been a Barcelona fan since I was little. So
Yeah.
having Messi come up with Barcelona, I've been a Messi fan forever. And so I was, after the heartbreak they had in 2014 against Germany in the final, and he didn't get his World Cup, I've been cheering for him the last couple World Cups to finally pull it off.
Well, okay. Everyone is cheering for Messi in the World Cup. That's not exactly like a unique thing. Like,
But being a fan of Messi because of since he was 17 when he was coming up through the club is different, right?
well, no,
And
I
so for
don't
me,
disagree with that. I'm just saying, like, everyone who's a
but
fan of soccer is a fan of watching Messi play in the World Cup. Like,
so Lindsay and I were, yeah, France was not a fan, but for Lindsay and
yeah,
I were
no one likes the
watching.
French.
They, what's the worst they're going to do? Throw a white flag at us? Um,
Yeah,
so
exactly. So anyway, you watched the World Cup. You made
So we
Lindsay
were
a
watching the
fan.
World Cup. Lindsay started watching to the point where in the World Cup final, she was yelling at the TV when France was scoring.
Right.
And I was like, I have won. And then
Yes.
to have City start right after that, the first inaugural
Right.
season, it was a great transition. So she gets angry if I watch games without her. So we
Right.
have to
I
we have
don't
to do it together.
I don't think Kelsey can name a single person that currently plays for the Cardinals now that Yachty and Waino and Pujols have retired. Um, she knows a lot of the guys that play for City by face. She's a big fan of the food at the stadium. Naturally, it's a good way to get
Dude,
anyone hooked is
let's
to
let's
go
be
and buy
honest. The
food. Let's
food
be
there
real.
is
That's top level food for stadiums for
every
anything.
every stadium needs to
Every
have food
stadium.
like
Yeah, like City
City
Park.
Park. Yeah.
Yeah, but she does get really into the games as well. And we were actually sitting on Saturday night, and I didn't tell you either of these two things entirely. So one, she was like, "Hey, didn't you say that your mom wants to keep Reagan this weekend?" I said, "Yeah, that's the plan." And she goes, "Oh, so we don't need a babysitter if we wanted to go to a game on Saturday." And I was like, "No, we do not need a babysitter to come to the game on Saturday. So that's what we're doing on Saturday now." But then the other thing was, so you and I have not talked about the replacement refs at all. We actually haven't talked about the refereeing at all on the podcast or offline. I don't think we need to talk about it on the podcast, but we can bitch about it a lot offline because there's a lot to complain about.
Yeah,
But
they left something to be desired, and then
yes,
CONCACAF refs are CONCACAF refs. So
right.
you
We're
know what
already
you're
used to
getting.
the right. We already know what we're getting out of CONCACAF refs. We've seen
If
a
you
lot of
watch if you
CONCACAF
watch
games.
if you watch U.S. national team at all, you already know what the hell you're getting. It's
Right.
not good, and you just
But
learn
you
to
know to
accept it.
expect it. Right. Yeah. Well, anyway, so like I was explaining during the game, these replacement refs, and she says, "Well, do they normally ref in Utah?" And I was like, "What?" And she goes, "Well, every call is going Salt Lake's way." And I was like, "I have made you a true fan. That is
Oh, that's
amazing."
fantastic. I was earlier in the day, and I don't remember which game it was. It's one of the early games on Saturday.
Um,
Um,
LAFC played Seattle, and I think Columbus played Atlanta. Were
I
the
was
early
watching
games.
it was the Columbus Atlanta game. Their center ref legitimately looked like a 56-year-old out of shape, like dad bod guy running around on the field to referee.
Living the dream. Living the
I mean,
dream.
like, I had a beer belly, especially, the last little stretch, the end of last year
Yeah.
before I went on my little diet and lost like 20 something pounds
Yeah, you're
since
you're
the
slimming
first of
down
the
up
year.
here in the face.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
also
see it.
trimmed my beard yesterday, so that helps.
Oh,
But
that's what it is. Never mind. You're still fat.
I'm still fat. It's fine.
Yeah.
Right. But like, I dropped from, like almost 250 to just under 230.
There you
So I've
go.
lost just over 20 pounds. But prior to that, and even still, I have a decent sized belly on me. We all know. I mean, go look at the pictures we've posted of you and I together at games, and you can see a little bit of belly poking out, right? Dude, this guy center ref's belly put me to shame. And this guy is like legitimately didn't move more than like 10 yards past the center circle on either
He knew.
side.
He knows his limitations.
He knew his limitations for this game.
Yeah.
There'd be a call in the box, and you could just it almost looked like disappointment on his face, like fuck, I gotta blow my whistle and run down here and talk to these assholes. And he's
Right.
like jogging on down, and I'm like, dude, this guy is not ready for this.
I'm gonna because you can watch all the games on replay. I might turn that game on for like 10 minutes tomorrow just to like see this guy. Because now I'm very, very interested
God,
in
and
that.
part of me is now thinking it may have been I watched multiple games Saturday that weren't our game. Maybe it was the Red Bulls game. I'll go and like watch on replay a couple games and I'll tell you exactly which game it was. But this guy was definitely like, first of all, kudos to the ref because he knew his limitations. Like, bitches, I ain't running with these young kids. I
That's
am
right.
well past my prime. I have not done this in like 15 years. They called me, here I am.
Right. Right. Um, but thankfully, in our next game at least, we don't have to deal with that kind of refereeing. Just
No,
normal
and
shitty CONCACAF
yeah, yeah,
refereeing.
just the normal shit show that is CONCACAF refs. So
Um,
you've spelled this out. You actually did a great post that you posted into
I
the St. Louis
did.
City
Thank
fans
you.
group on the Excel page. If those of you who don't know, John and I are both massive nerds and love spreadsheets and numbers, so we tend to resort to them when we don't
Yeah.
know what else to do. But
Yeah.
you made a great spreadsheet. But you want to kind of recap that for me on what that looks like?
Yeah. So essentially, and if you guys want to see it, just like scroll back a little bit on our main page, you'll see it because I did post it publicly as well. It's basically a grid, and it's one side of the box is how many goals that City scores, and the other that's like the left and right, and then the up and down or the y-axis for all of you other math nerds are the goals that Houston scores,
I like
and
that
then you find
you labeled them as y-axis, but you didn't call the x-axis for city. But
yeah,
that's fine.
no, I did not. Yeah, it's fine. I noticed that too, and I'm like,
And you
now I'm
call
cringing that I
yourself a
didn't say it for
nerd.
both.
Yeah.
Yeah, doesn't
Golly.
matter. Doesn't matter.
Oh, it matters.
Um, only to math Nazis like you. Um,
First of all, I don't
anyway,
appreciate being called a Nazi. I don't, as far as I'm aware, I don't have much German or any German in my heritage. I do have a shit ton of Polish though, so
so you have problems with Nazis, is what I'm
yeah, yeah.
hearing. Now we're gonna. I'm gonna. You know what? I would edit this. We're a no bleep podcast, but it would be really funny if I blurred out your finger. That would be really funny. But besides the point, you then combine the two x and y axes and you find the box, and that's the score for that. So like 1-0 city or whatever. And it tells you what happens if that's the score line at the end of this game. The important part of this is there's 4 ways that we can easily advance. First off, we win. If we win this second game in Houston, we advance. That makes sense. We won both games. Second, if we draw, we will advance automatically because we will win on aggregate, and that's the first thing that matters is the total score across both games. Now, the next 2 get a little bit more complicated to explain. If we score at least 2 goals and lose the game, but we only lose by 1 goal, we advance. So 3-2, we advance. If it's a 4-2 loss, we do not advance. We end our time in the competition. The other way we could advance is if we lose 2-1, but win in extra time or in penalty kicks, which is what it'll do. If we a 2-1 score in this game would be a draw on aggregate, and that's why it would go on to extra time. That's the only way that happens. We do not advance if we lose 1-0, because then the score will be tied on aggregate, but Houston will have an away goal, which is the first tiebreaker. If it's a 2-1 score, we're even on that, so it doesn't matter anymore. If we lose by 2 or more goals, or if we lose in extra time. So anyway, there's a lot of ways we can advance. We just basically have to score a goal.
Most important things here. If we win or draw, we're in.
Yes. So let's just win.
Win,
baby.
If we score at least 2 goals and it's only a 1-goal game, we're in.
Yes.
If we score only 1 goal and lose, essentially if we lose 2-1, is the only way that we go to the extra time / PKs.
Yeah.
So if we keep it within 1 goal, we're at least getting extra time.
Yes. Yep.
And well, unless they win 1-0.
Right. Well, yeah, sorry, I misunderstood what you were saying. Yeah, if we score 1 goal, we should pretty much get extra time. If we score 2 goals, it's like we should probably win. And also, if we score 2 goals and lose 4-2, we probably don't deserve to go on. So
here's so we talked about the center back. They called up Winslow. We've got options on center back. That's fine. I think that's great. We'll figure that out. Center back depth is what it is. I'm honestly, my biggest concern is, again, we've talked about it a lot, and I just keep coming back to it and keep trying to think through, like, Dewar, right? We have Dewar. What are we missing? We signed this guy. We thought he was, in my mind, when we signed him, he was supposed to be the left back. We've played Marcanic, has started both of the games. Is there something we don't know or that we're missing?
The few thoughts that I've heard thrown around is like, maybe, well, first off, that Marcanic came into camp and played a lot better than expected. But Marcanic wasn't playing with the starters in preseason. Watts was, right? So I was kind of like, okay, because I kind of thought Watts was going to be the second choice center back. So, but there's that thought.
Left back, but yeah.
Left back. There's the thought that Dewar maybe isn't picking up the system as quickly as we thought. And there's also the thought that he only got to play in 1 preseason game. And when we signed him, he was in midseason form. But then he basically took a month off without playing. So there could be some of that going on too. I would have to expect that if Dewar can play 45 to 60, Marcanic should be able to close that out. So, I mean, we really don't need Marcanic to be able to be – we don't need either of them to be full 90 fit. It would suck to have to burn a sub on a left back because we prefer in our system to use our subs for our attacking players because they cover so much ground.
Hear me out.
Yeah, what's up? Okay.
And I think this may be where the Watts situation comes in.
Okay.
What if you start Watts and Durkin in a double pivot, and rather than sub out sub in a left back, say you start Dewar, does if Watts is playing well and looking good, do they move him to left back and just bring in Blom to close out the game with Durkin?
I do think that that's a possibility. I could also see it going the other way, where Watts starts at left back and then moves into midfield. Um, when you sub out whoever, and you could bring in Marcanic or Dewar for the last 30. Um, Either one of those, I think, is completely possible. Something that you and I have not talked about online enough is the positional versatility that we have with a lot of our players is back there. So Blom can play central defensive mid. He can play probably either fullback, but we've played him at right back. And when we've had to, he has dropped back into a center back several times
Hmm.
for us. Nerwinski can
Durkin
play right
can.
back. Durkin can do that. Kojima can play central defensive midfield or outside back in theory, or will be able to. Watts can play both. Nerwinski can play center back or outside back. Hebert could play both technically. We can debate on how well, but we can and have used him in those spots. And so, like, I think you're always going to see a lot of those guys rostered because they give you so much flexibility for things that could happen after they come onto the field, right? Depending on other injuries and stuff like that. So yeah, all of that to say, literally nothing could surprise me. We're gonna have to make our lineup post tomorrow, and I have literally no fucking idea
I have
what
no
that back
idea.
line
It's
looks
it
like.
it for the listeners, it's 11:30 at night, and I have not figured out anything that what I'm doing with my lineup yet for tomorrow because I keep second guessing every choice I make. Like, oh well, that may not happen because of X, Y, Z. So I'm
Right.
gonna make some calls, and I'm just gonna wing it.
Sounds good. You know who's been winging running a sports franchise?
Who's that?
Stan Kroenke.
That guy's a real piece of work.
I've heard that too.
I didn't see how did Colorado do this weekend?
It kind of was like our first game against Kansas City in the playoffs, where
Hmm.
Portland scored 3 goals on like 0.08 xg. So it looks a lot worse than it probably actually was, but it's still an embarrassing stat line.
Hey, you know what? Anytime that Stan Kroenke's team loses is a good day to me. And so realistically, it's almost like 1.5 wins for St. Louis City this last weekend.
Oh, absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
because Stan Kroenke's an asshole, and with that, Stan Kroenke, we hate you. Good night, guys.